Okay, we are back. Trahvae.
What's I could not do it on my computer. It would not open for me.
Okay.
But I'm here with you now. Give me a minute to get this gimbal set up into here. How's it
Okay.
going? Man, how you arrive in spaces. Lord have mercy. Oof. Struggle is real today. So real. Ugh. Okay. Boom. All right. How's that?
That's good.
Good.
I guess to say welcome to folks who've tuned in so far. My name is Zac. I also go by Kailash Pati. It's my Sanskrit name. Here with Trahvae. We're going to be having just a short little discussion about some things. And so, um, I don't know, Trahvae, if you want to do like an introduction of yourself and just kind of.
You cut out for a minute. Say that to me again. I did not hear you.
I was going to invite you just to give an introduction of yourself.
Oh, right on. I'm Trahvae. I'm a yogi out in Hawaii. I live on the island of Oahu. Um, in my other life, I am a hairstylist and a contractor and a landscaper. And that's it.
As I said earlier, again, my name is Zac. I also go by Kailash Pati or KP, many different names. But I'm in Santa Cruz, California. Um, I live at the Pacific Cultural Center, which is been closed since the pandemic started, but a yoga center and community center, a part of the Hanuman Fellowship, which was started decades ago, inspired by Baba Hari Das, who was a yogi who came over from India to America and was a teacher to. So yeah, it's a bit about me. And so like I said, today we're kind of having just a general conversation about some things that me and Trahvae found to be meaningful, relevant to yoga practice, but also, how we hold our practice like on and off the mat or on and off the curve. Um, so I don't know if Trahvae, if you have anything you wanted to add before we jump in.
Let's jump in, friend.
So one thing we had talked about was initially was like, what does it mean? What does it mean to practice yoga? And also looking at the different forms that can take, like the Bhagavad Gita, for example. We have the yoga of meditation, the yoga of the intellect, the yoga of devotion, the yoga of service, work, action. And so there's these all these different paths and ways for us to engage in the practice. But I guess maybe for us to, Trahvae, if you want to share a bit what your yoga practice looks like currently for you.
My asana practice currently is I try to practice every day. I fell last month in December, so that sort of changed from like a rigorous Ashtanga practice to just some movements to stay loose on some days, some minimum daily requirements. But my discipline is definitely a regular daily asana movement. But I find that having to rest, since I had to let my body heal before I inverted again, having that rest allowed me space to do yoga in a different way because I found myself connecting with yoga principles and other aspects of my life, even though I wasn't physically practicing. And Not that I left and re-entered, not that I left the space of having fallen with the intent, okay, well, now since I can't go practice, I'm going to go do yoga off my mat. It wasn't that. It was more like, okay, well, I guess I'm like breathing and, not want to choke this person out because it just cut me off in traffic and did give me some aloha, and it was maybe being more mindful of ways that I was incorporating principles that I have because I have a regular asana practice, how I incorporate that in other forms of my life.
That, and have to share for me, my original sort of entry into the world of yoga was mostly through meditation, and I was introduced to Bhagavad Gita pretty early in my journey. So for me, my practice has very much looked quite classical in the sense that it's been focused on a seated practice, which is now inclusive of pranayama, meditation, mantra, as well as like chanting. I'm learning and starting to play the harmonium, and then of course as well also there is the asana practice for me, which is a less frequent for sure. Like my sitting practice is like a regular thing that I do daily. The asana practice is something I do as kind of like as needed, and just one of the ways in which I move my body. But also for me, definitely the principles is a big one, because it's like sort of, at least for me, trying to have this mindset of like, right now I'm sitting on my cushion, I have my meditation practice. But then when I get off my cushion, it's like, but there's still all these opportunities to practice, all these opportunities to learn about myself, opportunities to really be intentional about how I'm observing the principles, the yamas and niyamas. And so also trying to cultivate that awareness just moment to moment in everyday life, to continue to watch my mind, and yeah, and also having moments of noticing maybe little things, like maybe feeling myself feeling a little bit impatient towards someone, and like pausing, noticing it just for myself briefly, and then being okay, I can settle in. I have the space to be patient here with this person, and to be more present with them, and to more understanding, more compassionate. So yeah, that's a little bit from me.
I was thinking my practice changed a bit, or what my yoga looked like changed a bit when I did fall, because I started doing more meditation, and I got involved in a different way with some other community that was also yoga. But when I had such a strong asana practice without focusing on the other aspects of the yoga, I wasn't so conscious of. Now that I've started back practicing physically on a daily basis, and much more intensely than I had been, I find myself moving into my asana practice a little bit more meditatively, because I've been doing more meditation. And the other things, I've been more aware of my breath and where I'm sending my breath, because in the meditation, that's what I've been working with. And I think it speaks to the fact that yoga is more than just a practice that you do that's physical, or something that you do that's exercise. It's much more a science for life. It's something that you do to live better, to be human, to come into your ultimate self, or not come into your ultimate self, because your self is like always there and it's always ultimate, but to remove all of that callus that's over there that's not allowing you to see that you are right where you need to be.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's something that I know that we've talked about, something that feels it's important to stress, I think, more and more. Because yoga coming over to the West, it took on a certain form. Practice was something that was more easily like digestible for a lot of folks in America and the Western world in general. But that, again, that this practice is so broad, the world of yoga, the scope of it is so broad. And as I have a mentor who often says the water's as deep as you want to go. That we can really immerse ourselves in this practice, this way of life, this study, and this exploration or, path of realizing our wholeness, which, as you mentioned, is just always present, is here with us, but it's uncovering that which sort of clouds our vision. And I often think about, because I've just talked to people in my community who are elders now, who maybe when they were younger had really vigorous asana practices, and they did a lot of power pranayama, and then just they aged and their health circumstances changed, and they didn't have access to that in the same way. So then it's that question of like, well, if I can't, how can my practice evolve? And what does it mean perhaps to have a lifelong practice that I can carry from the moment I start practicing up until the moment of I actually like leave the physical body.
So I love that you brought up the word practice, because when we were talking about this yesterday, I feel that the definition that has evolved in Western culture around the word practice is far from what was intended when the sutras and the yoga was first presented as a form of science. Then practice meant something different. I think now we look at things and it's like, at first I thought, like I said, well, like athletes practice. And then I thought, athletes be doing the most sometimes. They practice, but then they so do the most. They practice, but then they're off. So I thought, okay, who practices? It was like, oh, somebody that uses their voice as an instrument, like, a singer, an opera singer, or really any singer that like they use their voice as an instrument. If they are very in tune to like being successful, they practice the practice includes eating the right things, taking care of this instrument, what they put in, what they put out, all of those things, how much they exercise. It's so much more than just, I'm going to do some exercises to get ready for this thing that I do sometimes. It's a way of life. So I often think of the word discipline, which that too has weird connotations in Western society, because, we think discipline, we think, oh, I got to be mean to myself and all of that. But I think discipline in the sense that you have this thing that you do that's more than just, I'm going to do it sometimes, or I'm going to do it when it's convenient, or when it suits me and I get what I need out of it, and then I sort of gravitate away from that. I think it's interesting to start to explore what a yoga practice is and what that means versus doing yoga. And it's a huge difference when you think of it in those terms.
Absolutely. You touched on a word that I know it can be a dirty word in our culture, the word discipline. We hear it and we're like, nope, not doing that. But for me, at one point, what kind of, as I was reflecting on the word discipline some time ago, was like, for me, discipline is simply choosing that which is most meaningful to me. And so it's not about, me having to give up things or me having to be mean to myself, but it's like, really being mindful and honest about, okay, what do I really want? What is really meaningful to me? And then if like, if this, thing is meaningful to me, then I have to take the steps to be able to pursue it or to be in alignment with it. And obviously, when you're talking about, talking about yoga practice and it being a way of life, or that it can be a way of life. And I think of, for myself, like I said, this is for me. Most of my practice is a sitting practice, pranayama meditation. But it's like if I'm if I'm in conflict with someone in my household, where there's not right relationship, that's something that can disturb my mind. It's going to perhaps disturb my practice. And so then there's a wish to keep things civil, to keep good relations with people, so that I'm not having that come up whenever it's time for me to sit. I made peace with that. We're on good terms. Same with food or things I consume. If I'm, consuming something that's not great for me, or eating too much for dinner, and then now I'm groggy in the morning, and then now I'm falling asleep during meditation. It's like that discipline of, it's like, what, like my practice is really important to me. So I'm going to maybe adjust what I'm having for dinner. I'm going to eat a little bit less, or I'm going to not have this thing tonight because, I want to be able to wake up and be energized and alert for my practice. In the same way of taking care of my body in general. It's like, well, if I'm injured and my body's in a lot of pain, it's like that can be a distraction. It can be something that makes it more difficult for me to practice. So, they think to talk about the practice of that opportunity for it to be an invitation for us to really be mindful of every aspect of our life, because, each part of our life affects the whole of our life.
So that brings up an interesting subject, that each part affects the whole. What does that look like then in relation to our need to attach and project into things, whether it be like our practice that it has to be a certain way, or attach and project into that 2021 is going to be a better year versus 2020, or that the inauguration just happened, that, well, now we are in this new place, and so everything's going to be different. When we talked yesterday, we kind of were talking about how there's a danger in projecting far into the future that things are going to be a different way, and then allowing that to be complacency for not taking action currently. And that, I think, is what is the common, that's what we do as people, that's a common denominator amongst people as to why people don't get things done, why people don't want to do change. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's for me, the question that comes up in regards to this subject is even the question of, why am I projecting into the future? Why am I projecting that things are going to be better in the future? Like, what is that about my current situation and the way I'm relating to this present moment? In the same way, if I was like looking back to the past, the question of, okay, why am I doing that? What does that say about my current way I'm relating to the present moment, that I feel the need or am habituated to looking into the past or looking into the future? Which is just a question. I'm not, I don't have an answer for that, but I think it's just something, I sit with. But the, thing about, again, speaking for myself, my own practice, is that in my own practice, there's this very important element of agency and sovereignty that I have to take ownership of my agency in order to practice. I can't, when I get to my cushion, nobody else can do that for me. My neighbor can't give me um, the discipline to sit and to really practice wholeheartedly. That's something that has to come from within me, and I think that because we are cultivating that agency, um, taking ownership of that agency in our practice, there's an opportunity for that to then bleed out into, other areas or all areas of our life. Just to remind ourselves that we are free to choose, that I can create, I can be an agent of change. So not only in my practice in my own body and mind, my own wellness, but also into my community, because we have, a tendency to, which I think we all saw, was, 2021 is going to be better. But like, why is it going to be better? What am I going to do? How am I going to go differently? That is going to make, the world around me or my environment a better, more loving place, more beautiful place. Because if each of us is not willing to take ownership of our lives and our decisions, I could assume that a politician is going to fix it, and obviously they have a certain scope of power to do certain things. But I think there is a danger, as you alluded to, a danger in sort of projecting our agency out to someone else or to an organization when we are capable of that. And I think that in the practice we are reminded of that and encouraged to acknowledge that again and again, that we have that agency. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I think it's very dangerous to project into the future that things are going to be better when, I was talking to a friend of mine just earlier, and we were talking about, we all know that there's this coronavirus pandemic that's happening right now. And I think a lot of people are like, well, when it gets back to normal, or when everything is at this point, then I'll do X, Y, and Z. And it totally allows you to be complacent in the space that you're in right now and not have any responsibility for changing your actions. And yoga, says you don't need to look out for any external point to find this peace or find this space, is really what you're finding, to find this space to allow the mind to quiet, to allow the energy to flow. And I think that when you arrive at the place that you think that you needed to get to for you to change things, so often whatever you projected into the future, it's not how it is. And you have all of this time and this energy that you have been inactive and that you haven't been living and experiencing. I think religion oftentimes allows people to project into the future. Our society does that. It's like you work hard, you got to work hard, you got to hustle, you got to grind. And then that one day eventually will turn into you being able to retire and enjoy your life and relax. Okay, but then that point happens and you don't have any health, or all that happens. And as far as, like, we were talking yesterday about like happiness and heaven and nirvana and all like the spaces of like peace that you can come to when you are not projecting into the future. There's a lot of space that can happen when you can sit with, well, right now, what can I do to create some of that in this moment today? It forces you, yes, to be responsible for yourself and not project that on anybody else. It's not, well, I'm going to have this life that I live that is this way, but I'm going to like do my service on Sundays, or I'm going to go ask to be forgiven. And then at some later date in the future, I'll be able to experience this thing. Yoga says, experience this thing now. How about that? How about, you get to be in this space right now. You don't have to wait. And you could do that if you want to pause, breathe, experience that breath, follow that, And is it as simple as that? It is, because that's not simple. That's challenging. Man, let me tell you, I have to huge shout out to you. I like your transparency in talking about, you're your yoga practice right now is you sitting more and, doing these forms of meditation and working with breath and everything. I think it's so awesome to be able to be on platforms like this and talk about the types of yoga in the broader context than just the white lady that does the yoga that's yo, I'm in my Lululemon, now let's breathe. Or the person that's in the, very ascetic sort of Eastern thing that we think about when we think yoga. I am so inspired by the different forms of yoga that I've been exposed to in a new way that I haven't been exposed to before these platforms by people that look like me. I think it's super cool that your practice right now is deeply rooted in something, in a way, in an expression that at one time I was okay, that sounds kind of interesting, but then I'd be oh, I don't know. It's there are temples and gurus and all of that, but for the opportunity to be able to see it with somebody that looks like me and is having a similar experience on their journey as me, it is allowing me to see all of the facets of the yoga, which is next level, and to be open to oh, well, wow, let me check this meditation out a little bit differently, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and well, I appreciate you sharing that, first of all, and that is definitely something that I think is so deeply important, is that representation, which obviously this platform does such a beautiful job of offering through social media and to so many folks. Because I know for myself, it's moving in the spaces I've moved in, generally there are predominantly white spaces, predominantly women, and usually middle-aged or older folks, generally where I happen to live, in spaces I'm in. And there's something really beautiful and profound about, finding folks who look like us, who are navigating similar things, because there's something very inspiring about that. There's something very practical about it. It's living in, black and brown bodies. We, just specifically just talk about racism, and white body supremacy. It's we navigate that in a way that is unique from people who exist in white bodies. And so the practice itself, the way we talk about it, the way it'll land for us, the way it'll be meaningful for us, will also, the aspects of that will probably be unique to our experience. And so, but having the community is a way for us to engage in conversation and dialogue, and to be really sitting with, okay, how is this landing for you? And for me, there's, as I mentioned before, this idea of ahimsa, just as an example, and I'll mention this in conversation. Ahimsa, when we look at the Sanskrit, it means, we often see it as non-violence or non-harming. But with the Sanskrit, there's also another little flip on it, which is to do the opposite of violence. And so for me, it's a really important question to sit with these questions of, what does it mean to do the opposite of violence in relationship to systems of oppression, which are causing harm to Black and brown folks, to folks who are LGBTQ, trans folks. poor people, et cetera, et cetera. It's like that for me, which is generally not a part of the conversation talking about yoga. You know, the ahimsa is there. We're sort of like, oh, it means like, you know, I'm gonna be gentle with my body. I'm gonna like eat vegetarian food. I'm gonna be nice. And there's like that layer. Um, but I feel like there's an opportunity, which is happening more and more for us to really ask these like deeper questions because they are so relevant. It's like if I want to, you know, I want to relieve harm of my own body and others, like I'm looking at this like status quo, these systems which are they are causing harm. So it's like, you know, am I responsible to address that in some way? Which, you know, again, I don't necessarily have an answer, but I think it's a worthwhile answering the question. I mean, I personally, I feel like there is that I do have a responsibility as a yoga practitioner, someone who is interested in observing a life of nonviolence, of truthfulness, so on and so forth. And that is, you know, for me, that's a big part of my practice right now is that kind of reflection, which doesn't necessarily involve certain breathing exercises or certain poses, but is you know, me really sort of grappling with life circumstances and how to question of how to show up and relate to it.
I love that. I particularly resonates with me. You brought up the word community. I think that a lot of people maybe right now are like, I'm not going to teach or I'm not going to practice because of X, Y, or Z. I'm going to do it later. I'm going to do these things later. And they don't necessarily feel like they have a connection to a community because their practice is in a certain way. To all those people, hey, y'all, what's up? There's like awesome community and people that are doing all the yoga sciences. You know, yoga gives you all the tools. It's just not like, let's go move your body. It's, you know, also the tool like, how do I go out and present as a person of color having these experiences um, in a world that is, you know, is it the real world or is it the real world? You know, is it the world that I'm creating? You know, how's that all look? Um, and the intersection between I wrote what where I feel as a yogi, where versus where I feel as a black person or a person of color or a gay person or a poor person, you know, bald person, person with a big butt, whatever it is that you are associating with, I think sitting in spaces where you can have conversation, have dialogue, have connection with other people that are also experiencing similar things is important. And I think it allows you to move into your practice differently. Um, it allows space for the subtle differences that occur in all of the yoga practice to be able to be more, I think, relevant to you as a person. You know, it's not like you just evaluate or equate your asana practice with your entire yoga experience. I think that's when your yoga becomes a practice or a discipline. You know, it's a way of life. It's not just something that you're going to do, which is why I think, you know, it is dangerous to just be teaching yoga and not diving into the other aspects of yoga, the space that yoga is opening up, some of the Sanskrit behind the yoga poses and the sutras and all of the layers of the yoga. Um, I think that exploring all of that is so beneficial if you are taking this as a path of a scientific approach to life design and how to be a person.
And there's something for me that comes up in response to that is that, these traditions, like, they have been viewed as paths to liberation, to freedom, which is, I think, for, all of us, so it's deeply meaningful. Like, yeah, of course I want to be free. Of course I want to be liberated. Obviously we can, then we investigate, like, what does that mean within the context of the yoga traditions, and what does that mean for me individually as well? And what does that mean for, how I relate to community, which I think is a part of the practice that is, again, more and more being investigated as this part of this aspect of community, and like that my individual freedom or my individual practice also has implications for the whole, for the community, for my family and my friends, so on and so forth. But I love that you touched on community, because I feel like that's something that more so within the context of Buddhism is much more like apparent. The Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, a spiritual community. But how, like, having community, for one thing, it provides a space for us to investigate together, to share, to practice together. But also it's like a way for us to have like accountability and discipline, where it's, if I'm saying like, yo, we got this meditation at 6 o'clock, it's like, like, but just that we can create opportunities for each other to practice because we're connected. And that is I think such a, where it's, again, it's not just about me, like decentering myself, and it's like, okay, how can we make it about us as well? And I just see a question of what does liberation mean? It's a great question. Trahvae, do you want to unpack what liberation means to you?
I love it. I love it. Okay, Oprah, just pass that on over to Gail. I love it. That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Absolutely, Oprah. So
I'm happy to answer afterwards.
no, I know I'm giving it to you, friend. What's liberation mean to me? I think liberation means a space of being able to come into my true self, of a space of realizing I am part of a whole, despite all my tendencies to want to be like separate. I'm not. I'm unique, but I'm not separate. And liberation is a space of being able to be in a space of being alone and not lonely, and allowing your own personal spiritual inquest to be the thing that just fuels your soul with passion, not being with your family or a place or a person or a particular loved one, but being able to be enraptured with self, and in a sense of constant wonderment. And yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm on board with that. But yeah, for me, liberation, I mean, so it's liberation very much in the classical sense, which won't get too much into like the theory, but liberation in the sense of, the individual soul, or the individuated consciousness returning home to the universal, and being free of our attachments or aversions, and again being able to return to what we can call spirit, Purush, consciousness, awareness, God, the self with the capital S. So many different ways we could frame that. So for me, there is that. For me, liberation definitely has that flavor of having that recognition of that I am, as you mentioned, as I am a part of a whole, that I am not separate from reality. I'm not separate from the God self, spirit. And also liberation for me means a quality of peace. And something I've been investigating is peace that like negates anything, but a peace that holds any experience I'm having. I can be both experiencing grief and also peace. But that peace is sort of the ground or holds that grief where I'm not I'm not at war with my grief, or I'm just using grief as an example. I'm not trying to push it away. I'm not judging it or making it bad, but I'm breathing with it. I'm present with it. I'm holding it. And so in that way, it doesn't, the grief doesn't have any power over me. It's not a problem. It's a part of my identity as a human being, which for me, again, is deeply important for my practice and what it means to be liberated in my own body and mind is to not be at odds, to not be in conflict with the fact that I am human. That part of my identity is a human being, that I can both be identified and connected with the higher self, with pure spirit, and I can also hold my identity as a human being, as a black cisgender heterosexual male, as well as a son and a brother and friend and all the things. So yeah, that's for me, kind of unpack the idea of liberation. So thank you, Donovan, for the question.
Yo, Donovan.
And Zach, does peace always begin with you? That's a great question. Does peace always begin with me? I feel like I look at this multiple ways, and one way is, so I can say yes, that my peace begins with me. And I also say that recognizing that, again, that I am part of a whole, that I don't exist in a vacuum. I'm intimately connected to nature, my environment, the creation as a whole. So that's all there as well. At least for me in my experience so far, there is an element of intention or discipline in cultivating that peace within. And I think there's also, talk about like peace without peace in relationship, which maybe begins with me in some sense, but involves other beings, involves other people, that there is a way in which we have to cooperate to cultivate and maintain peace together. I'm curious, Trahvae, if you have any thoughts on that question.
I do. I think it's interesting. I often reflect on the words that we use and the power of words. I think we often use words like peace, happiness, and love in terms of being places relative to everything being the same for all experiences. But you could be peaceful and be angry. There can be anger and still be peaceful. Jesus was peaceful, but he sure whipped those people in that temple. He whipped them all over that temple. Okay. So, but was he peaceful? He was. So there's a proper place for that. I don't think that peace is a place that you arrive at, that it's like, okay, well, or this thing that's a tangible thing that you take and I'm going to put it here and then it's going to do this. It's the same way with happiness. There are ranges and facets to all of those things. I think often we think of yogis as people that are just peaceful and they just pray, and a yogi's a warrior. A yogi is a warrior, and And I think that as you investigate other mystical texts, we talked yesterday about the Bhagavad, Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Gita. Good grief, I can't talk today. And how it's about a war, it's about these people that were fighting each other, and they were family members. There's complexity to that, and there are dimensions to that. And I think that it does us no service to think of being a yogi is that you are complacent. I think this kind of takes us back to the principles of ahimsa, and what that means. So, does peace always begin with you? I don't know that I have an answer to say yes, peace always begins with you, because things are constantly changing. I think, maybe you try your best, but, sometimes how your best is and due to circumstances or what it is, that peace may look different. That peace is not going to necessarily mean complacency. I suppose that's sort of where I'm going with that.
No, I love that, because I think that is something that for me comes up a lot, of acknowledging the way in which I think sometimes in certain spaces we are like encouraged to be complacent. And I think, you mentioned being a warrior, and for me, that this idea of warriorship is about being willing to face what is, to face the truth of ourselves, of the world, of reality, and to meet that, with an open heart, with an open mind, with a willingness to respond to it the best that we can. And I think that's, again, an aspect of the practice that sometimes is maybe lost. Is, I remember a Buddhist teacher who was talking about meditation. And for him, like, meditation wasn't about becoming calm or feeling good. Meditation was about seeing the truth. And I think that being a warrior is that willingness to face the truth, which requires us, it's not looking different for everyone, but like for me, like there's times where that looks like being willing to like sit down and be with myself, and to sit with maybe uncomfortable thoughts, to sit with maybe uncomfortable sensations in my body or emotion, and be willing to be with those. That feels, again, deeply important for me in my own practice, that I don't want to bypass. I don't want to spiritual bypass, but want to really, get into the nitty gritty of my experience and my trauma, my attachments or my aversions, but really to see myself as clearly as I can, in hopes of being able to see the world more clearly, so that I can better be of service, being able to actually see what's happening without so much like blurring of my vision due to my own stuff.
To me, I feel like that is like the best explanation of liberation, being able to be on that path to that, because that is the path to the new, to letting go of the self, and being able to sit in the ultimate self,
I love that.
All right, they're firing these questions out. What's next? I know clearly Donovan is on deck, because you said Donovan's question, so I'm sure he got something else sassy to say.
Yeah, maybe open up questions. Why not? questions. And Trahvae, well, you got anything else you wanted to kind of bring to?
You know, this is good. This was awesome. I'm glad we did this. I love this opportunity to do something different. You know, yesterday you and I were talking about things. I was telling you we communicated about this last week with Danny, and I'm very much an ex-perfectionist. So old me would have been very much like, I need an email and I need all this direction and this or that. New me is like, well, you know, it'll come together. It'll be what it's supposed to be in the moment, and not in the I'm just not going to do anything, but in the I'm going to keep doing the other work that I'm supposed to do. I'm going to keep doing my practice each day. What do I need to do now, today, in this moment? Because that's the thing, it'll take care of itself. And then totally organically, we ended up being in a space yesterday where we had space to sort of have a conversation about some of the things that we wanted to talk about. And I love the work that happens when you begin to take the space of doing something on the mat, off of the mat. You know, I think often we think about, you know, we get to a pose, we practice in the pose, we sit, we hold it, you know, we observe all of the intonations that the pose has, our breath, all of that. But when we could do it off the mat, it's really cool. And so for me, I've been working with just getting something done and not it being perfect and having not attachment to it being just my thing or any of those things. And friend, I had to like stop. And when you started at 2 o'clock, I apologize. I was a little bit like off on the time. I had a moment of like, wow, we are doing the thing that we said we wanted to do. We wanted to like have more conversations by people that look like us about yoga and about like the yoga toolbox, all the yoga stuff, you know, not just the practice. And like, wow, you are getting to do this. This is next level. And I think, you know, we expect to see these big things happen sometimes. You know, I'm doing this thing and I've been doing it and nothing happens. And sometimes you just got to keep doing the work. You just got to show up and do the work. You got to do the practice. You got to do the discipline. And then one day, without your without your knowing it, you know, you're like, whoa, I'm doing the thing. So yes, we're doing the thing. That's good stuff. Thank you for having me. Thank you to Danny for providing the opportunity and the space. And thank you to all the other like members of Black Boy Own that I see that maybe I haven't connected with. But I see you. You're loved. You're appreciated. Mahalo.
That's beautiful, and something I want to touch on briefly before we go. So I know there's a couple of questions maybe I can answer in this short little spiel. Well, I'll just say, someone asked how long I've been meditating, and it's been around 8 years, something like that. I started in college. I think around 8 years regularly. But you talk, you know, you touched on where you show up, you do your practice, and you have an intention, and all of a sudden like you realize like the thing is happening. And for me, that's so reflective of practice and the, you know, attaining, you know, the goal of our practice. I think of just again like meditation, where like there's all those, you know, day after day of sitting, and the mind wanders, and you bring it back to the breath, wanders again, you bring it back, and then, you know, at least for me, begin to discover the way in which you cultivate that awareness, and that awareness becomes more sensitive, and you become able to begin to watch the mind without being so wrapped up in it, where the mind can move, but it doesn't mean that I'm distracted or I'm being pulled by it necessarily. And then slowly, more and more, just each time, you know, I bring the mind back to my breath or to whatever I'm concentrating on, you know, then it begins to happen more automatically, becomes a more sort of normal thing that I'm not necessarily having to work so hard for. But It's just, but I think that to me is a beautiful reflection of the way in which we continue to set the intention, we continue to practice, and that things can start to bloom out of that, that aren't necessarily us doing it, but we just continue to show up to it and we trust the process, trust the practice, to do the work now in this moment, to do the practice right now. And even if that's something not just yoga or meditation, but it is, some kind of project someone's working on, it's like, do the work you need to do today and do that again tomorrow and again tomorrow. And then eventually like something has been created and it's like, when did this happen? But here it is. So yeah, but Trahvae, I want to thank you for taking the time out, and yeah, shout out to Black Boys On for giving us the space, and I want to thank you to everybody who's tuned in to catch this live. This video will be up on IG for like a day, like 24 hours, and then we'll go over to YouTube, so it will be available if you want to rewatch it. And then, yeah, I don't know if Trahvae, if you want to drop your IG tag so folks can get that if they want to follow.
I forgot I was not on my computer and I'm on my phone, so I'm down here typing on my computer like my mom, bless her heart, and not realizing. So that's my Trahvae. Boom.
Yeah, and I'll just say
Oh, I guess that's the one I'm on, but I'm sorry, friend. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Good. I'll say my tag is Zac Allen 108. So ZACALAN 108. So if you want to follow, love to connect, love to build community. Yeah, we'll Trahvae, and then everyone. Hope everybody has a beautiful rest of your day or afternoon, evening, night, wherever you might be in the world. Definitely wishing you all happy and healthy. Namaste.
Namaste.